You've been studying this for coming up on almost 3 decades now. Am I correct there? What have you seen in your years of work with this rise, obviously, in social media and pornography, which we're probably gonna get in today? How have you seen that playing out in your clinical work?
So starting in about 2005 in our clinic, which is the addiction medicine dual diagnosis clinic, so we treat patients with straight addiction and with other co-occurring mental health disorders, we started seeing more and more people coming in specifically seeking help for pornography, sex addiction, and compulsive masturbation, mainly middle-aged men. And nearly universally, what they reported was that their sort of sexual behaviors and masturbatory behaviors were manageable until the advent of the smartphone and the sort of 24/7 nature of its digital delivery system just was like the thing that tipped them over the edge and created a phenomenon where their lives were out of control and they were clearly, harming themselves as a result of their addiction. What's been interesting in the last 5 years or so is we've been seeing more and more very young men, teens and 20s, coming in with sex and compulsive pornography and masturbation addiction. And it's been interesting to see that. I think, what we're seeing is actually rising numbers of people struggling with this problem, but also I think the good upside of the internet, more realization that they're not the only ones, that there's potential help, that it is an addiction, that they don't need to feel this overwhelming shame about the behavior, that it is something that happens not just to them and others, and they can do something about it.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I felt and experienced here. So I launched this podcast in July of 2019. So we're coming up on almost 3 years, and for me, it was overcoming my struggle of almost 20 years. So I'm 38, so I'm a little bit older to where I didn't have the devices like in my early teen years, but it definitely still got me, you know what I mean? So it's obviously been very, very promising to, to see people like yourself and some of your other colleagues, like really getting out there. And, I don't know if it's, yet mainstream yet, because I still get it. Like, when I'm going on a podcast, and I'm sure you get this as well, it's like, oh, we're gonna have the taboo conversation. Why do you feel, as an expert, as a professional here, why do you still feel that people need to layer it with that? It's a taboo topic. It's like, it's not, right? It's a part of all of our lives. It's more than half of the men statistically are struggling with this. Why do you feel it's still got this taboo label attached to it?
Yeah, interesting question. So I just want to sort of echo what you're saying is I'll often go on shows and we'll talk about almost every drug, but no one will bring up the pornography, sex addiction thing. And it's funny because my book, Dopamine Nation, actually opens with the case of somebody who is severely addicted to pornography and compulsive masturbation, actually makes his own masturbation machine. And my editors, my agent were like, well, are you sure you want to open with that? And I was like, yep, that's the story. That's the heart of the story. Even though I talk about a lot of other drugs in the book and behaviors, I'm like, we need to open with that. So I'm really glad I did that. And I've gotten a lot of gratitude from people for doing that, which has been nice. Why the added layer of shame? I think it has to do with a couple of things. I think it has to do with the ways in which sex is like the last physical thing that we do with our bodies that connects us to our bodies, that is still kind of okay, right? Because there's a lot of so much of the physicality of our lives is gone now. We don't, except for sadly right now in the Ukraine, we don't fight people physically. We don't do physical things to get our food. Machines have taken over so much physical labor. So we don't really move our bodies. So there's this way in which sex has become kind of like the preoccupation of the entire culture. At the same time that we have this movement in which the adjudication of sexual interaction is now outside of the purview of religious mores and in the criminal justice system. So that, not to make a comment one way or another about the merits of the #MeToo movement, But the bottom line is that we have a much freer society when it comes to normative sexual practices. And yet we have more conflict around sexual practices than ever before. And the way that we're now reconciling these conflicts is to essentially make it a legal matter and adjudicate it and talk about aggressors and victims. And I think in that climate, it becomes very, very difficult to talk about sex, especially sex addiction. Because of course, inherent in sex is the sort of dominance kinds of things. I mean, inherent in sort of sexual acts, there are power differences, or let's say that can be an aspect of healthy sex, right? But how do you then integrate that in a culture where really almost any man is potentially, an aggressor, somebody who will be accused of sexual assault? I think that adds a whole other layer of shame when it comes to pornography and sex addiction, and men in particular getting help with these types of problems.